Well, Mike Sleesen, you are on Driven to Ride. How are you, sir?
I'm pretty well.
That's good to hear. So, for those who don't know, you are a legend in the motorcycle community. But I want to ask you why. What are you known for? What is your claim to fame, in your own words?
Well, I mean, what I've done my whole life here is I started and still run and own Vance and Leathers, and that's what we've done now. 50 years next year.
Wow! Congratulations. So, how did Vance and Leathers get started? What got you into that industry?
Well, I was a student and working in a motorbike dealership in France, and it was a Moto Britannique, so they were selling Nortons and Triumphs, BSAs, things like that, and also some Suzukis and Urals. But anyway, this is back in 1970, 71, 72. And so one of the things we did was go over to England, which was the Mecca for all things motorcycle in the 60s and early 70s. And we'd pick up parts and accessories, clothing, and bring it back for sale in the shop. There was no open border the way there is presently. Well, of course, now Britain's out of the EU, but there was no open border, so everything was a little bit of a fiddle, you know. And when I ended up back in the States, one of the guys I'd been buying from and active with in England ended up here at a trade show looking for a distributor, couldn't really find one, and called me up and said, "Hey, would you be interested in distributing our stuff in the U.S.?" And so he said, "If you say yes, I'm going to stop and see you in Boston." So I said yes. He stopped and saw me in Boston, and that's really how it started. And so that was in early '73.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, congratulations on almost 50 years so far.
Yeah.
But let's back up a second, because you just casually dropped that you were working at a motorcycle shop in France, and I got to imagine there's a story there. So, is Europe where you got into motorcycling, or how did you get into motorcycling initially?
Well, my father was Dutch, and we lived in Holland. I was born in California, but we moved to Holland in '62. And lived in Holland, and then lived in Belgium, and then I lived in France. But the whole motorbike deal was my aunt. My aunt and uncle had been displaced. Their house got bombed in the Second World War, and so they ended up living in. They were in an estate. And they were living in the carriage house of an estate, and the estate had been expropriated. It was German property. It was Jewish property, and the Germans took it over. And I think the family didn't survive the war, and the Dutch government, in the housing shortage, used every house they could to have people have a roof over their heads, because everything had been destroyed. So they lived in this estate, and it was several acres of forest, and maybe about 30 or 40 acres. And she had a Solex, which was one of these French bicycles with a motor on the front wheel. And, you'd pedal it up and drop the motor onto the front wheel. It had a friction drive. So it would kick off, a little two-stroke. And anyway, when I was 8, 9, she let me ride that around the paths in the woods, and it was really kind of cool that you could do 20 miles an hour or something like that without pedaling.
Yeah, that's wild.
So that's kind of when it started. And then after that, of course, in Holland, everything had bicycle paths, and on the bicycle paths, you were allowed to ride motorbikes up to 50 cc's. So there was an awful lot of that, and you were able to get get a moped, if you will, because that's really what they were. At age 16, and then car licenses weren't till you were 18. But so everyone was buzzing around on these things. Most people earlier than age 16, I might add, but that was the deal. So.
Okay, yeah. So, and I mean, in Europe, it seems like, especially back in the 60s, motorcycles and mopeds and small displacement bikes seemed to be more of a utility thing. It was really the only affordable way to get around, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, they had a pretty good public transportation system there,
Sure.
but in terms of actually going somewhere, yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
And in Holland in particular, I mean, everything was on two wheels, bicycles,
right.
and then mopeds, and people went distances. The country has a whole network of bicycle paths that go from city and town all over the country. So it's really an independent, small network of bicycle highways almost, so you're not really dealing with cars and traffic and that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because bicycling is pretty big in Holland. I mean, it's one
definitely.
It's a big thing. So does that transfer over to motorcycles in Holland at all, or not really?
Well, it did in the 60s. Everybody was on mopeds. Everybody was doing stuff. The Honda 50cc, C110, and all that. I mean, those were they were pretty prevalent. The Germans had Kreidler. I mean, they had the original nickel sill plated two-cylinder, two-stroke. I mean, single-cylinder, two-stroke, and I think they were good for 110 kilometers an hour, which was kind of a miracle out of 50 cc's.
Yeah, seriously.
And I ended up. I ended up with a Garelli, which had a 4-speed hand shift.
Oh, wow.
And it had an 18 millimeter Del Orto carburetor on a 50 cc bike, and it was kind of funny because you took the pedals off, so it looked more like a bike than a moped, and then there were no. I mean, in the 60s, at that time we were living in Belgium, and they didn't even have a requirement for a driving license. As long as you were 18, you could get behind the wheel of a car or get on a motorbike. So,
wow.
And there were unlimited speed limits on the highways once you're out of the cities. So, I mean, the whole thing was really kind of different. But on that Garelli, you could get right behind a truck and draft it and hang in there at 100 kilometers an hour and sit up if you wanted to, and
Man.
So yeah, there was a lot of that type of stuff. And
so, do you remember? Excuse me. Do you remember a time or a moment when you started riding that you knew you were hooked?
Well, on the Garelli, I loved it because you're independent, right? And you're out and you're doing stuff.
Yeah.
But on the Garelli, when I was 16, I did a camping trip. Was gone for about a month, tent, sleeping bag, and ended up driving through France and into Switzerland, and ended up in Milan and Venice and Padua and that Via Emilio or whatever they call it there, and then came back through France, all little roads, of course, but camping every night, and that was it. I mean, that was I couldn't get enough of that.
Yeah. What a way to see Europe. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was good. It was.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, especially, I mean, it was, there's so much to do and see, and it was terrific. Couldn't beat it.
So when you got back to the States, was there a big difference in the motorcycle culture between Europe and America?
Yeah, very much so. the speed, the road speeds. Once you got off the mopeds and you got onto the real bikes, I had a BSA 650 Lightning after that, and then I had a 750 Commando, and then a second 750 Commando, which I still have.
Oh wow!
But they, the speeds on the roads they were beginning to get speed limits, but on the main roads, if you were, especially the toll roads in France and so on, there were no speed limits. So it was completely different than here, and in very disciplined in terms of the rules of the road and passing on the left, no passing on the right, and those kinds of things. But and here in the United States, the speed traps and the police and so on were much more aggressive than they were in Europe at that time. It has since completely changed and reversed. So now in Europe, it's the land of speed cameras and crawling speed limits between cities and Christ, or some of these highways now where it was formerly unlimited speed is now, you're doing 35, 40 miles an hour on a 4-lane road. It's just nuts. So yeah, it's completely different than what it used to be.
Yeah, sounds like you were in Europe at the right places at the right time to kind of enjoy that magical time of motorcycling.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was definitely magical.
Yeah.
Of course, like human nature being what it is, if you have a bike that'll do 100 miles an hour, then you tend to push it.
Yeah.
But today, now you get a bike that'll do 160 miles an hour, and it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, before you even know what's going on, you're pushing 100, 150. So
yeah, or more.
Did you ever reach 100 miles an hour on that Norton Commando?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's got to be pretty special that you've held on to that bike for so long. It's does it still run?
Yeah, it's had a few iterations. We had significant crank failure at about 80,000 miles. So we have an 850 set of cases in it now with a stroke or crank in there. So we actually push. We're actually pushing something like 875 or something in terms of capacity.
Sure.
But yeah.
So what has driven you to keep that bike for so long? I mean, some people, there's some people who buy one bike or two bikes and keep them forever. Some people buy and sell all the time and are constantly changing. What's motivated you to keep that motorcycle?
Well, I mean, I think the Norton is it's a romantic bike. I mean, they're beautifully made, and they're very when you're never driving to someplace. You're always driving towards someplace, because you're not sure you're going to get there. But it's but they're beautiful machines, and I've driven all over the United States on mine. I've got more than one now, but they're great machines.
Yeah. Where's maybe what's your favorite trip that you've taken on that Norton in the U.S.?
Well, there are a couple of trips that are pretty good. I did I was in California and went to Laguna Seca, and the races were there. And in fact, Peter Williams and David Croxford were there, and Brian Slark was the guy running Norton's out of L.A. or that L.A. area, and so they were racing there. And Peter Williams, I got to know him afterwards, but it was that was kind of magical. And then I carried on down to Mexico and came back up through the middle of California, through the Sierra, up the Route 49, the gold country, camping the whole way. So that was really a pretty good trip. I was late at night, and I ended up on Route 1, which joins 101 somewhere around Santa Barbara, and it was probably 2:00 in the morning. I was very tired, and there are no buildings along that stretch, and I ended up pulling off the road a little distance and set my tent up and went to sleep. And in the morning, I woke up. Of course, the sun's bright and all that, but I was woken up by truck traffic, and I got out of the tent, and I realized I set up the tent right in the middle of a clover leaf, where right in the grass. It was so dark at night, no moon or anything, and I hadn't realized that I was really camping in a piece of grass that was sort of right in the middle of the off ramp, on ramp.
That's a heck of an alarm clock.
But then, Florida did a great trip up through all the little roads through Florida, both coasts down to Key West and up, and that kind of thing, that kind of dinking around is great.
Yeah, and it's safe to say, obviously, motorcycling is mostly about the journey rather than the destination, and I think being on a Norton Commando probably makes that journey even sweeter, as long as it's running.
Yeah, as long as it's running, yeah. But there's really not too much that you can't take care of on that. I mean, it's all basic stuff,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you are based in the Northeast, if I remember correctly, right?
We're in Fall River, Massachusetts, yeah.
Yeah, so you've got to have some amazing roads and destinations up on the Northeast, right?
Well, they're different areas,
sure.
But yeah, I mean, you get out to Cape Cod. We're right on the edge of Narragansett Bay, so you've got all the coastline, and then north of Boston, you've got all of Maine and New Hampshire, and it's Vermont, Western Mass, very nice as well, at the Mohawk Trail.
Yeah, that's the only part of the country that I haven't been to is the Northeast, and I feel like I'm missing out on a lot. So I've got to get up there one of these days.
Yeah, no, it's special. It's surprisingly unpopulated once you get out of the cities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's where you started Vanson Leathers? What drove you to start it on the East Coast in the Northeast?
Well, I went to Boston. I ended up here for college and started Vanson when I was in finishing up my college, so I was I started in my apartment in my bedroom with a couple of racks of coats. I mean, that's basically how it happened. And then we went from there.
So where did the name Vanson come from?
So I had a partner when I started. His name's Jamie Goodson, and he and I met in Brussels. We finished high school together, and then we went to Paris. We were there for a couple of years, and then I came to Boston, and he eventually got here. We are good friends, and so that's how the business got named. And he was my partner, and we split off in 83.
Okay. So going from making coats and jackets in your apartment to making world-renowned racing leathers that can hold up to a 200+ mile an hour crash. I mean, that's a hell of a jump.
Well, yeah, but you got to figure it's a fair bit of time to get there. So it's it's incremental,
Okay. Yeah. So what were the first few years of Vanson Leathers like then?
Thrilling. Are we going to make it? I mean, it was a whole different world. And you had an infrastructure of people in the business almost everywhere you turned around. You couldn't go to a town without getting the yellow pages out and looking under garment making or sportswear manufacturing, and every town had businesses cutting and sewing and making things.
Mm-hmm.
And here in the Boston area, it was really a major center for leather and all the things you need to make shoes and gloves and jackets and bags.
Uh-huh.
Boston had what they called, they still do, they call it the leather district. There's no one left in there selling leather, but it was the headquarters for the companies trading and tanning leather. They were there with their showrooms and their sales offices. All of that's gone away now. We when I started there, you could get anything you wanted right in. If there were people making thread, there were people making zippers, there were people finishing cloth and doing the leather everywhere. So that was a completely different environment than what exists today, where a lot of those components are not even produced in the country anymore, which is another issue. But and the skill set for, we were at the tail end. We were at the tail end of the of the active part of the industry, so we were able to benefit from a lot of knowledge. We learned a lot from people who'd been doing it all their lives at that point, and you can't even. I can't even think of how you would begin to learn all the things you need to learn to do this kind of business at this point.
Sure.
It's not a question of theory. It's not a question of making patterns and design. It's a question of knowing how everything has to go together and making it that way, so that it will go together. I mean, you can design a one-off of anything, but we need to make stuff that's repeatable, and that enhances, let's use that term, enhances the quality of the product substantially. So it's a craft, but it's definitely an applied science craft. It's not a gee, let's do it this way today and that way some other day. So
yeah. There's some science and engineering behind the crafting of the product, applied
and theoretical.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, Vance and Leathers and your suits for a second, because, your racing leathers have stood up to almost 200-mile-an-hour crash from a top fuel dragster, and the guy walked away. I mean, how do you make something like that? How do you engineer something like that or design something like that that's so tough that can last and can keep somebody safe like that?
Well, the main thing comes down to the shape of the basic pattern to get a shell that keeps the protection areas in the proper location. So you need to have a shell that is close fitting, but still allows movement. And you need to make sure that if there's an impact or a slide, that the padding or the armor or any particularly reinforced area like a shoulder or a knee or a hip or so forth, that the shell of the suit doesn't rotate and expose the rider to a thinner, less well-protected layer between them and the asphalt. It comes down to working on the specifics of the shape of the basic pattern, and then you work on the fit to the individual. So you have to have your basic design, and then you go from there to the tailoring aspect to the particular individual. to make sure that you create a garment that will perform as intended in an extreme situation. For example, if you make a sleeve that's too big, somebody puts it on, they're going to say, "Oh, this is really comfortable." But if it's too big and they fall down and something goes wrong, that elbow protection could rotate out of position, and you can create an elbow injury in a heartbeat. So you need to make sure that everything stays where it's intended to be. And that's tricky because with armor, you need to have it so that it stays with the body, but the shell can still slide over it a little bit. Otherwise, it becomes too restrictive when they're moving. So there's we do a thing called floating armor, but it's to allow some slip between the armor and the shell, so that there's the ability for some movement. When you put your arm forward, you want that armor to stay at the apex of your elbow. That's important. Right. You need it to stay at the apex of your shoulder. That's important. You need it to stay over your kneecap. That's important. And when you wear pants, if you get on a bike, you feel like you want to pull the knees up a little bit usually, right? So all this shifting needs to be accounted for in the shape of the garment, of the basic pattern, and then you adjust to the individual.
So really the fit is not just about looking cool. It's really, there's actually a lot of safety that goes into it.
There's a lot of safety that goes into it. And one of the, and some levels of protection, in particular at present, the airbag is the big thing. But most airbags, first off, to be effective, they need to go off. They need to provide protection between the rider and the suit. But then whether they're under the suit or on top of the suit, one of the real problems is they tend to block the ventilation. And ventilation in a suit is critical. If you get a hot, humid day, someone dehydrates, they'll overheat, and that's more dangerous than not having an airbag. That's my opinion, but I think we've borne that out. So you have these conflicts, right? And you want to make sure that the airbag is controlled in a way so that, one, the ventilation is protected, two, that the airbag is protected from any change of shape or twisting, three, that the airbag is led over the areas that you want and need protection for. And then you need to have the whole incorporation of armor and the airbag and the shell of the suit needs to all be calculated out. And a lot of times there's an expansion panel in the suit, and that's okay, but you don't want it to, in a critical moment, expand, and you don't want to actually lose the other points of protection because the shell now is too big and allows rotation.
Wow.
So there's a balance there.
So how did you learn all this stuff? I mean, did you learn as you went when you started Vance and Leathers? Did you study in school?
No. We learned as we went, and we've been very fortunate. We've worked with a lot of people who race, a lot of racers in different disciplines, and from them we've learned a lot. And in a lot of them, they come and they say, "Hey, we suggest this because," or "Can you make an alteration this way or the other because," and that's how you learn. And you just have to really be close to it and stay with it.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got to be out there testing and actually doing, having trial and error, it sounds like.
Yes. We prefer more trial and less error.
Right. Well, in addition to racers, you've worked with Hollywood a lot. You've worked with some high-profile movie stars and a lot of Hollywood stunt riders. How did you get into that section of, motorcycling and all that?
Well, the stunt riders, have come to us because they want some protection, and
Mm-hmm.
the DNA of the company is the road racing and the flat track and that type of thing, drag racing. So that's what's been important to a lot of these guys,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's a carryover from that, and then because there's so much racing, it goes on to what people who are riding. A lot of the Hollywood guys ride, and
Right.
so again, the DNA carries forth,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how that all got going, and still rolls because of what we do.
Sure. Has there been any time when you were starstruck or kind of like pleasantly surprised where a celebrity or a super famous racer came in, or do you kind of keep a cool head no matter what?
Well, Daniel Day-Lewis came in
Oh,
a
wow.
while back. This is a long time ago. Okay, probably 15
Okay.
years or so.
Sure.
Maybe even 20 years now. But he came in and he said, I said, wow, you're some kind of famous guy. And he said, well, you're not so unfamous yourself, or something like that. He was riding a Triumph, came to see us. They were filming in Massachusetts. And
Okay.
so, but it happens. We get
Have you ever
guys.
had a client or somebody come or talk to you about a suit and you didn't realize maybe how famous they were until after the fact?
Well, I did a jacket for Larry Bird, who used to be with the Celtics, and he came in and he must have
Okay,
been
yeah.
He was almost 7 feet tall or something,
Right.
right?
He's a big guy.
And I didn't really know who he was because I don't follow that
Sure.
closely. But so yeah, I mean, I was, what's your name, Larry? What's your last name, Bird? Bird. Okay, I got it. But but we've been doing stuff with Jaylen Brown now, so that's been quite a bit of that going on with the Celtics.
Sure. Cool.
So
Yeah. I've noticed too that again, the DNA comes from the racing and the flat track and all that kind of stuff. It seems like a lot of people use or wear Vanson as a fashion statement too. Have you kind of had any thoughts about that, or was that a surprise to you that it went from like track to a kind of a fashion, an arm of fashion?
well, if I don't know if it's a surprise or not, but if you look at what it is they're wearing, it's all track oriented. It's all
Right.
flat track road racing oriented. They're not
Mm-hmm.
plain black jackets or something like that. So,
Yeah.
at least not most of them, but in the urban scene.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean that's something where we do quite a bit of that. We take graphic designs which we developed for the racing suits, and we cut them we have a water jet, so we cut the leather on the water jet, so you get nice clean edges, and we created sort of our own look, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
of how graphics get onto the leathers, and that's a little different than most people. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got to say that no matter what piece you're looking at from the Vance and Leathers catalog, it all looks cool. So, and looking cool transcends any industry, any culture, anything like that. So, I think that's pretty cool that people that may not necessarily be directly in the motorcycling world are appreciating that. So,
well, we were very fortunate to work with a fellow by the name of Mick Ofield.
mm-hmm.
And Mick formerly was a designer at Norton's in England. He's an English guy.
Oh wow, yeah,
And we work. He did all our catalog work and a lot of our designs. he's a terrific designer. And we worked with him probably close to 18 years until he retired. However, he's coming back out of retirement, and we're going to be doing a series of retro jackets.
Oh, cool.
And we're not talking retro from the, we're not talking retro sort of Bad Boys on Triumphs or something like that. But this is going to be sort of European style cafe racer, evocative designs, 70s and 80s with the colors and the separations and the swirls and all of that type of stuff that we do. That's one of the hallmarks of our products. And so that's where, he's been on the team. He's been retired, and now he's coming back. It's going to be it should be very interesting what we dream up.
Yeah, that sounds like an exciting time. I'm kind of excited to see that. Do you think that, like, it's kind of sound like it's coming full circle, like the pendulum swung one way and now it's swinging back the other way? Have you seen that throughout your career in the motorcycling world, like trends coming back or people coming full circle to different styles and thoughts and opinions on stuff?
I think that's a good observation that you're making. When we went to the Vintage Days, the AMA Vintage Days in Mid-Ohio in July, what struck me was the number of young families that were there. The attendance was, there were some guys looking like me, white hair and all that, but there were an awful lot of guys with young kids. They were active. There were a lot of mini bikes running around. It was you could see a future there, and that's cool. That's after coming through probably 15 or 20 years of what was no longer being in different events and certainly rallies. I mean, if you go to Daytona or you go to some of these large rallies, they just don't have the level of energy and enthusiasm and attendance that they had 25, 30 years ago.
Sure.
And so you've been looking around, wondering where's the next generation coming from, and there hasn't been one in any significant number. But I'm thinking that we might be bouncing off the bottom of that, and a lot of these, what I saw at Mid-Ohio was what I would call really kind of normal bikes, if you will, really evocative of the 70s more than anything else. So kind of naked, kind of simple. We're not worried about huge capacities. We're not worried about 180 miles an hour. We're not, it's a more, I'm going to use the term human scale, which I think is really good to see and important. And the other stuff has become so difficult. The capacities and the speeds are so great that I think the insurance issue has done a lot of damage to the viability of those numbers.
Yeah,
and
good point.
And I mean, when you consider the sport bike numbers that Suzuki used to do with the Hayabusa family and all of that, I mean, they were north of 70, 80,000 units a year, and then it fell down to like maybe 5,000, 6,000 units, and it's never really totally recovered. And really, I mean, the bikes are terrific for what they are, but it's just it's overdone. I don't want to use the term overkill, but let's just say overdone. Sure. I need to adjust this thing. Hold on.
Yeah.
This is an antique. There we go.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I feel like that, yeah, the motorcycle world is kind of turning back almost to the back to basics, where there's not an emphasis on speed and displacement and not necessarily the latest technology in riding and performance. It's more enjoying the ride, and I've seen that whether it's, been on the metric side or even on the American side. It seems like people just are enjoying the experience more, and that seems to be coming back, which is kind of cool. That must harken back to the days when you started riding in Europe.
Yes. I mean, we had 6.5 horsepower, we weren't, we were more concerned with keeping up than, you didn't want to get driven over.
Yeah. So after 50 years, you've accomplished a lot. What is you feel your best accomplishment, or what are you most proud of with Vance and Leathers?
Well, we're still here. And I look around the landscape and I don't see very much in the way of domestic competition the way there used to be. With the decline and everything else, it's a tough business. And I find it very satisfying that I'm in a luxurious position where I can indulge myself and make things that I think are interesting, and I think some of the things that we've come out with have changed the industry. I think that we did we had a number of patents, some of them have expired and so on, but on the armor and ventilation and air curtains and the double front zip suit to give you a clamshell shape in the front, and to conversely move the zipper teeth away from your neck, so that if you have a severe enough impact, you don't want the zipper to slide down, which it can do in an impact, even though it's a locking zipper, and you can actually the teeth could cut your neck. I mean, that's happened in some car crashes.
Sure.
Because we do some car suits as well. So anyway, leading the zippers away is an enhancement. Improving the fit was an enhancement. Evacuating all the excess material from the center front. I think we've made a bit of a difference. It's one of the things I told Mick to get him fired up again was, hey, he and I and Vanson and really did make some difference to the industry and what, some ideas and so on. So
yeah,
I find that all very gratifying.
I would imagine so, to be able to make a positive influence and to keep people safe, really, because you're helping them enjoy it, the sport of motorcycling or racing more, and they don't have to worry about what's going to happen if a crash happens. They know they're protected.
We try.
Well, and you put a lot of hours into it. I want to ask you, maybe just the process of making a suit. How many hours go into actually creating the suit from, let's say, raw leather comes into a finished product? I mean, that there's got to be a lot of hours that go by making that suit.
There are hours involved. We've methodized it, as obviously, because you want to have the highest quality on a repeatable basis, and so that has to go all the way through. When we get an order, we put the measurements from the customer into our database. We use the program that we've generated internally to check against the averages and look against body mass, height, and so on. And we're able to extrapolate because measurements come in. They are self-correcting in a lot of ways. So if you're dealing with a across the shoulders, sleeve length, nape of neck to wrist, that kind of thing, Someone may not have the points exactly right, but we put all those things together, those three measurements, do some math, look for ratios that fall within the norm, and we can pretty much say, okay, this is how wide the shoulder really is on this guy, and this is where the sleeve length needs to be.
Sure.
And then because we do that, and we've been gathering these measurements since 1994, we're able to guarantee the fit. So when we do a custom suit, we're the only people I know of that guarantee the fit.
Wow.
And once we do that, we make the pattern for the suit. Everything isn't computerized, and so we retain those, which means that if it comes back for any kind of repair or any kind of alteration, we track all of that. So if somebody wants to reproduce a garment, we can do that, and we do that frequently. And we can say, okay, do you want it the way it was first made, or do you want it the way it was altered on the first or second, whatever? Because some of our suits last 20, 30 years, actually. And so people change over time. But so we keep track of all that. And we, everything that we make, even pair of gloves or suit, they're all individually numbered. And we keep a database with who the owners are and the alterations. So it's like a VIN on a car or on a bike where we have a number. And then essentially from there, it goes up to cutting. We do the graphics, and then you put it together. So the hours involved, to answer your question, you've generally you're probably on an average suit, you probably have 2 hours of graphic work. You probably have 3 hours of design work in the pattern department, 3.5, something like that. Some things that can be more complicated can take an entire day. But on average, we're just drawing a bead. The cutting is relatively quick, and then from there it's the assembly. So if you have a suit that's 3.5 hours, 4 hours worth of design of pattern work, if you will, and 2 hours worth of graphics work, you've probably got an hour worth of cutting on the water jet, and probably because you have to prep the leather and get the right colors and split the leather to the right weight and tape it and then cut it on the water jet and It isn't just like throwing the stuff in, and then the panels are cut, and then you have to do the same thing with the lining, and then the lining's made in one part of the shop and the shell's made in the other, and they go together into finishing in a third, and that's where it all gets married together, and there's your suit. So if you've got the amount of sewing time is going to be a function of the amount of design time, generally, because the design time is a good predictor of the intricacies. More panels, more sewing, more. It's like a jigsaw puzzle after that, So, so you'll have to do a suit. You may have an average suit day and a half, almost 2 days.
Wow.
If something more complicated, you might have 2 days, 2.5 days, something like that. So and it's really a question of the embellishment and the graphics, and there's all that has to be laid out and done in a sequence.
Sure. Yeah, I'm racking my brain trying to think of something that people buy nowadays that does take that much time and that much craftsmanship. But I can't imagine there's that many products out there like that takes that kind of time and dedication and attention to detail. Even in the motorcycling world.
Yeah. Well, I'm, probably more focused on the sewing aspect and so on. But if you're going to order a custom kitchen and a counter, somebody has to come out and draw your counter and make the plans and measure, and they usually make a template, and they're gonna actually cut the granite, and then they got to polish it, and they got to drill it for the faucet holes, and so there are things that take time. If that's what you're going to do, It's a whole lot different than going down to Home Depot and getting one of those Formica counters and sticking it in, So,
yeah, if you're going to do it right, it does take time.
Yeah.
You mentioned a while back over the years, a lot of stuff, like the leather district in Boston, there was a lot of supplies and stuff that you could get like right down the street. But now you've looked more internationally in terms of working with different suppliers or different things of that sort. Do you ship a lot of custom suits out internationally as well?
We do. We do suits and jackets. We sell in we sell in Japan. We sell in Australia. We sell in China, which is difficult because of the testing that the Chinese require to get into their country.
Oh, really?
We sell in South Korea. We sell in Europe. We have for years.
Have you been able to travel to those places?
Yeah, and I haven't been to Korea, but I've been elsewhere. Yeah.
What do you think is there, or let me back up. Have you noticed a common thread among motorcyclists all over the world?
Well, Japan has a phenomenal culture, motorbike culture, really. In Korea too. I haven't been to Korea, but I've been. So it's sort of that universal appeal, of being able to go out and do stuff. So Europe is still Europe, but they're very they're very strict. I mean, you can't even bring an older machine of any kind, car or motorbike, into the city centers now for any reason. I mean, you can't have a rally under the Eiffel Tower with your Norton Commando from 1970 because it's too old and pollutes too much. So,
wow.
The whole flavor is different now. And I, if you look, I mean, I don't know if Harley Davidson's results that came out for last quarter with their live wire sales and so on. I mean, that they said that they'd sold between 600 and 1,000 bikes or something like that in the live wire division, right, for the quarter, and they lost $135 million in the live wire division. So, there are aspects of this business that are challenging, to say the least. And I think that applies worldwide.
Sure.
But I don't know. I cannot imagine that there's not going to be a continuation of interest in particularly the countries that use the bikes for transportation. India, for example, Pakistan. We've had customers of ours, go and make tours in Pakistan and do videos and so on. And it's pretty phenomenal. Latin America, it's interesting.
Yeah. I think a lot of people forget that there are countries and places in the world where people use motorcycles as transportation every day, and that's their only option,
Yeah. Well, we forget it here because it's so far behind us that but it does have, I think that's, I think the progression is transportation to hobby or enjoyment. And maybe then, maybe people get wealthy enough where they transition into really expensive bikes that, I mean, these guys are spending hundreds of dollars, not 10, 20, 30,000, you know,
Right.
and, I mean, you know, when I, in the 70s, I mean, you bought a used bike, you changed the shocks, even if you bought a new bike, you know, you put conies on it, you put something like KD1 tires on it, you put rear sets on it. You know, I mean, other guys went the other way and put a sissy bar and improve the handling with an extended front end or something, you know. But the point was that you bought something that you were going to then fiddle with and change and make personal to you, and the overall, you know, it wasn't. A lot of people did the work themselves, and it wasn't. You know, it didn't turn into the $30,000-$40,000 showpiece. You know, we sort of lost all that doing your own garage and create something.
Yeah. I think that is coming back a little bit, though. Just I see
I think we saw that at Mid Ohio. Yeah, I think we saw the genesis of that at Mid Ohio, where you get something, you know, the capacities, whatever, and then that becomes either restoration or a little cafe or a little but or touring or something, you know. But
sure,
but there was activity, there was effort, there was thought going into it, and you know, it seems that's a resurgence, that's a renaissance, that's good.
Yeah.
That's what the youth coming along, where they get to learn a lot about what it is they're doing, you know, how it runs, what keeps it going, how to change the oil, you know. I mean, there's been a whole period of time where you went to the dealer for this and you went to the dealer for that, and you know, so this is kind of I see a little bit of a return to a simpler time, which is good.
Yeah, agreed. Last question. You know, you've been in the motorcycle industry for, 50 years again. You've been riding even longer than that. What about motorcycling is so special to you?
It's being in the world, not you're in it, you're part of it, and it's, I would say, an ultimate expression of personal responsibility, and I think that's engaging on all levels.
Agreed.
And,
very exciting.
And I think that's the real deal. I mean, you know, whether you're racing or you're driving along the coast and, you know, looking at stuff, or you're going, whatever it is you're doing, you know, I mean, it's your responsibility, and you're challenging yourself one way or the other along the way, on different levels. And of course that it's personal. It means something. It means something different to everybody. But I think that's the attraction.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Before we end, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to mention, or that you want to talk about?
I think we've covered a lot of things. So I'm whatever. If you have any other questions, you can give me a call, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. It brings back a lot of memories, you know. So that's good.
Cool.
I like that.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it, and we'll hopefully talk to you again soon. I got to get up to the Northeast and come see you.
You got a place to stay.
All right, Mark. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.